Islamic Sicily, A History, Chapter 4, The Kalbites. In 947 AD, the Banu at-Tabari, a noble tribe of Persian origin in Palermo, rose against Ibn Ataf, and it was to deal with this situation that Hassan bin Ali al-Kalbi was sent from Ifriqiya. This governorship led to the foundation of the semi-independent dynasty of the Kalbites, which ruled the island for over 90 years. After bringing the situation in the island under control, Hassan invaded the Italian mainland twice, in 950 AD and 952 AD, as we shall see later. On the death of the Fatimid Caliph al-Mansur and the accession of his son al-Mu'iz, who reigned from 953 AD to 975 AD, Hassan went back to Mahdiya to attend the Fatimid court, leaving the government of Sicily in the hands of his son Ahmad bin Hassan. In the Fatimid service, Hassan and a flotilla from Sicily took part in the raid against Almeria in Umayyad Spain. In 958 AD, he joined hands with his brother in his Italian campaign. In 962 AD and 963 AD, Ahmad bin Hassan undertook the definitive subjugation of the mountainous region south of Messina, where several Christian towns had survived in semi-independence. These towns were now forced to pay jizya, and Arab colonies were planted in their midst. In the course of these operations, Ahmad, aided by his cousin Hassan bin Ammar, turned aside to lay siege to Taormina, which had shaken off Arab rule. The siege lasted for 7.5 months until the surrender of the citadel in December 962 AD. The citizens had to give up their property, but their lives were spared, though many were taken into slavery. Taormina was renamed Al-Mu'ayyiziyah in honor of the Fatimid Caliph. Dear listeners, support me with Buy Me a Coffee or a Super Thanks. The Christians of Ramata appealed to the Byzantine Emperor Nicephorus Phocas, who sent a powerful force for the relief, consisting of Armenian, Russian, and Thracian troops under the command of the eunuch Nicetas. Ahmad appealed to Al-Mu'iz for reinforcements, and a strong force of Arab and Berber troops was sent under his father Hassan. The Byzantines, who had landed near Messina, suffered a disastrous defeat both by land and sea. Nicetas was made prisoner and sent to Ifriqiya. Ramata was taken by storm by the Arabs in 965 AD, but during the siege, Hassan, the founder of the Kalbite dynasty, had died. As late as 969 AD, the Fatimids had no intention of installing the Kalbite family permanently as hereditary governors of Sicily. After a governorship of more than 16 years, Ahmad bin Hassan was recalled to Ifriqiya with all members of the Kalbite family, as well as its clients, dependents, and retainers. The government of the island was entrusted to Yaish, a freedman of Hassan. This led, however, to disorders in Sicily, the main victims of which were the Kutama Berbers. Al-Mu'iz had to recall Yaish and to send Abul Qasim Ali bin Hassan to the island as the deputy of his brother Ahmed. Ahmed, however, died a few months later, and Abul Qasim was confirmed as governor in his own right in 970 AD. Kalbite rule was thus implicitly recognized as hereditary by the Fatimid sovereigns. In 972 AD, Al-Mu'iz transferred the Fatimid capital to Cairo, and this meant in practice, though not in theory, much more independence for the Kalbites in Sicily. Bulukin, the Zirid lieutenant of the Fatimid Caliphate in Ifriqiya, was given no jurisdiction over Sicily. Other factors leading to the consolidation of the Kalbite dynasty in Sicily were the general satisfaction of the Muslim population with the comparative tranquility in the island, the expansion of Muslim colonies, and the need of the Fatimids for a loyal dependency in Sicily, whose ruler might be useful to them in their naval enterprises, and to whom they could grant internal independence as they did to the Zirids in Ifriqiya in 972 AD. On their part, the Kalbites remained impeccably loyal to the Fatimids and received titles of honor from them. On the death of Abul Qasim in the Italian campaign, the notables of Sicily elected his son Jabir as their emir, and he was confirmed by the Fatimid Caliph Al-Aziz, who reigned from 975 AD to 996 AD. Jabir lacked the caliber and administrative ability of his father and his uncle. He was soon deposed by the Sicilians and recalled to Cairo, where he fell victim to a court intrigue. Al-Aziz next appointed another Kalbite, Jafar bin Muhammad, to rule Sicily. Arriving in 983 AD, Jafar set the affairs of the land in order and worked towards restoring its prosperity. He was respected by the Sicilian elite for his learning and by the common man for his generosity. He died in 986 AD and was succeeded by his brother Abdullah bin Muhammad, who also died in 986 AD after an uneventful reign. He had during his lifetime nominated his own son Abul Futuh Yusuf as his successor, and Yusuf's nomination was confirmed by Al-Aziz, who also bestowed upon him the title of Tiqad ad-Dawla. Yusuf's rule was efficient and peaceful, and he made some incursions into Byzantine territory in southern Italy. He gained a reputation for magnanimity and justice. His own and his court's culture is reflected in the literature of the period. In 998 AD, Yusuf became incapacitated by a stroke, and his son Jafar succeeded him, receiving from the Fatimid al-Hakim the titles of Taj ad-Dawla and Saif al-Mila. But in fact, he was more independent of the Fatimids than his predecessors. He had his own vizier and hajib, which means chamberlain, like any other independent Muslim monarch, and the poets of his reign called their patron Malik, which means king, in their panegyrics. Though well educated, Jafar did not possess the qualities or the intellect of his father. He was indolent, avaricious, and cruel, and the decline of the Kalbite dynasty really begins with him. In 1015 AD, his brother Ali bin Yusuf rose in revolt against him with the help of Berbers and Negro slaves. The revolt was suppressed, and much to the distress of his ailing father Yusuf, Ali was executed. A 10% tax was imposed on grain and fruit. This was followed by an uprising in Palermo in 1019 AD. At this juncture, his paralyzed father Yusuf intervened, pacified the insurgents, deposed Jafar, and replaced him by his other son Ahmed, commonly known as Al-Akhal. At his accession, Ahmed al-Akhal received from al-Hakim the ceremonial title of Tayyid ad-Dawla. At this point, the Emperor Basil II, having defeated the Bulgars and re-established Byzantine authority in the Balkans, appointed Pojanis to deal with the Arabs of Sicily. The latter fortified Reggio and landed at Messina. The Zirid al-Mu'iz offered support to al-Akhal, but his flotilla was wrecked in a storm. Byzantine naval reinforcements under Orestes were defeated near Reggio by the Arabs. Between 1026 AD and 1035 AD, the combined Zirid and Kalbite fleets carried out raids against Byzantine territories, including Illyria, some Greek islands, and even the coast of Thrace, and by 1035 AD, the Byzantines were ready to treat for peace. In the same year, the Kalbite-Zirid alliance broke up. The leader of a revolt in Sicily, one Abu Hafs, sought help from the Zirids, and Al-Mu'iz sent an expeditionary force to support the rebels. In 1038 AD, Al-Akhal was defeated and executed. For a time, the Zirids seem to have had considerable influence in the island, but other political and military factors were also present, while on the horizon were the Byzantines and beyond them the Normans. In 1037 AD and 1038 AD, the Byzantines invaded Messina with a powerful force and were joined by an estimated 15,000 Sicilian Christians. The Byzantine general Maniakes had already distinguished himself in the wars in Syria between 1030 AD and 1034 AD. Messina was soon occupied, but it took Maniakes 2 years to gain a firm foothold, despite the assistance of some Russians and several hundred Normans, including Harold Hardrada, hero of Scandinavian sagas. A victory at Ramata led to the occupation of about a dozen towns. while after another significant victory at Troina in 1041 AD, most of the towns around Etna came into his hands. Owing to court intrigues, however, Maniakes was recalled to Constantinople and imprisoned. The generals who succeeded him were less than a match for the Arabs, who by 1042 AD had regained almost all the lost territory. This Arab counter-offensive against the Byzantines was organized and led by the Kalbite prince Hassan as-Samsam. During the Kalbite period, Sicilian and other Arab naval and military activity against southern Italy continued, though without achieving any permanent result. Hassan bin Ali, the founder of the Kalbite dynasty, aided by an auxiliary force from Ifriqiya, besieged Reggio and almost penetrated its defenses. He then moved towards the northeast and laid siege to Gires, which bought peace by offering to pay tribute. Then, pushing aside a Byzantine force, he reached the valley of Grati and besieged Cassano, which also agreed to pay tribute. After this, he returned to Messina, but again invaded Calabria in 952 AD, inflicting a severe defeat on the Byzantine army, whose commander Malakinus was killed. Hassan then proceeded to besiege Gires, but raised the siege after the arrival of a Byzantine embassy led by John Pilatus and the conclusion of a peace. Among other terms, the Byzantines agreed to the construction of a mosque at Reggio. Minor Arab raids continued even after the peace, and from time to time the inhabitants of some coastal towns in Calabria had to seek refuge in the interior. Hassan's brother Ammar invaded Calabria in 956 AD, but in the meantime a Byzantine force had attacked Sicily, taken Termini, situated only 24 miles from Palermo, and threatened Mazara. 2 years later, Hassan joined his brother in a counterattack in Calabria, and together they challenged the Byzantine fleet at Otranto. About the same time, a Muslim flotilla attacked Naples, and though it failed to capture the city, gained much booty. In 961 AD, peace was again concluded with Byzantium. Dear listeners, support me with Buy Me a Coffee or a Super Thanks. After the defeat of Nicetas in 964 AD, a decade of peace between the Byzantines and the Fatimids followed. It was broken by the Byzantine occupation of Messina, which was reoccupied by the Kalbite Emir Abul Qasim in 976 AD. He then pushed on into Calabria and advanced into the valley of Grati as far as Cosenza, which was forced to pay tribute. In 975 AD, after a gap of half a century, an Arab force under one Ismail made an incursion into Apulia near Bitonto. In the following year, other Arab raids in the region of Bari followed. In 976 AD and 977 AD, Abul Qasim again personally led an Arab force into southern Italy and attacked Taranto, set fire to Oria, and advanced as far as Otranto. Santa Agata, near Reggio, was captured by the Arabs. Between 978 AD and 981 AD, there were frequent raids into Calabria and Apulia. The Arabs even threatened the Lombard territories of Salerno and Capua. In 982 AD, as the Frankish Emperor Otto II advanced into Calabria, Abul Qasim regrouped his forces and achieved a victory. Otto II barely escaped with his life. Military and naval expeditions occur sporadically through the next 3 decades. In 986 AD, the Arabs occupied Gires and again advanced as far as Cosenza. In 988 AD, they threatened Bari, capital of the Byzantine dominions in southern Italy, but when they could not effectively besiege it, turned to attack Taranto. In 994 AD, they occupied Matera after a long siege. In 1003 AD, they besieged Bari for several months until a Venetian fleet arrived to relieve it. In 1006 AD, an Arab attack near Reggio was repulsed by the Byzantines with help from Pisa. In 1009 AD, the Arabs again marched through Calabria as far as the valley of Grati and occupied Cosenza. By sea, the Pisans inflicted a heavy defeat on an Arab fleet in the Straits of Messina in 1005 and 1006 AD. Either in 1012 AD or in 1015 AD, a Muslim flotilla from Spain under Mujahid bin Abdullah of Denia made an assault on Pisa. Probably it was the same Arab force which had occupied parts of Sardinia. It was defeated by the combined fleets of Pisa and Genoa. After 1016 AD, no Arab force invaded Sardinia. In 1016 AD, Sicilian Arabs besieged Salerno. During the siege, they are reported to have had their first encounters with the Normans. The same pattern continued for another 2 decades, but the Arab raids into Apulia began to decrease. Nevertheless, they threatened the suburbs of Bari between 1010 AD and 1015 AD, and in 1020 AD, in alliance with Raika, an Apulian, they occupied Pisignano. In 1023 AD, Abu Ja'far, who has been identified by Amari as the Amir al-Akhal, attacked Bari. In 1029 AD, along with Raika, he ravaged southern Italy and laid siege to the castle of Obiano. In 1031 AD, the Arabs occupied Cassano. A Sicilian Arab flotilla, which was attacking Corfu in 1032 AD, was defeated by the Byzantine strategist Nicephorus Carantinus. Another fleet from North Africa suffered the same fate off the western coast of Greece. In 1034 AD, when the Byzantine Emperor Michael IV sent an embassy to al-Akhal, the Emir of Sicily, he was negotiating from a position of strength, and al-Akhal accepted from him the title of Magistros. From this point onwards, the Arabs are on the defensive. In 1034 AD, the Pisans captured Bone in North Africa. 30 years later, they were to attack Palermo itself. This attempt, though unsuccessful, was of great daring, and was commemorated by the Pisans in verse and in an architectural inscription. Individual Arabs, however, did not at once withdraw, even during the period of the disintegration of Kalbite rule in Sicily and of the rise of the Normans. At least up to 1060 AD, there continued to live at Reggio and other places in southern Italy a number of Muslims who were probably merchants and refugees. Many Arabic sepulchral epigraphs have survived in Italy. Poetic sonnets which have come to light in recent decades reveal that the Kalbite state in Sicily was plunged into civil discord in 1040 AD. The Sicilian history of the period from 1040 AD to 1052 AD is confused and anarchic. In 1040 AD, the Zirid prince Abdullah bin al-Mu'iz was defeated and chased away from the island by the Kalbite Hassan as-Samsam, Samsam ad-Dawla. But Hassan's authority did not last long and did not extend over the whole island. In the 1040s, Muslim Sicily came to be divided into several petty principalities. The Qaid Abdullah bin Manqud, or Manqut, became the master of Trapani, Marsala, Mazara, Schiaccia, and the western plains. Another Qaid, Ali bin Naima, better known as Ibn Hawas, took possession of Castro Giovanni, Girgenti, and Castronovo. The Qaid Ibn Maklati occupied Catania a little later. In 1044 AD, as-Samsam was deposed, and with him the Kalbite dynasty came to an end. Palermo became a kind of oligarchical republic governed by its notables. Of all the petty rulers, Ibn Hawas was comparatively the most powerful. The division of these petty principalities was further accentuated by ethnic distribution. Amidst all the segments of population, there were Arab and Berber immigrants from Ifriqiya and Spain. Between 1053 AD and 1060 AD, yet another Qaid, Muhammad bin Ibrahim bin At-Sulama, better known as Ibn At-Tuma, emerged as the master of Syracuse and attacked Ibn Maklati, the ruler of Catania, who was married to Ibn Hawas's sister Mamuna. Ibn Maklati was killed, and Ibn At-Tuma married Mamuna. He also defeated Ibn Manqud and took possession of his territory in the western part of the island. Ibn at-Tumna appeared at this stage to be even more powerful than Ibn Hawas. He assumed the august title of Al-Qadir Billah and had the Friday sermon read in his name in Palermo. A domestic rift between him and his wife Maimuna, and probably also rivalry from the supreme power, led to a conflict between him and her brother Ibn Hawas, the master of Castrogiovanni. Ibn at-Tumna tried to besiege the impregnable city, but without success, and on his defeat the whole of Sicily seemed to slip from his grasp and rally to the support of Ibn Hawas. In desperation, Ibn at-Tumna offered the island to the Normans in southern Italy, in the vain hope that after conquering it, they would hand it back to him. As an Arab chronicler puts it, the causes of the ruin of the Muslims in Sicily were envy and discord. Dear listeners, support me with Buy Me a Coffee or a Super Thanks. The pattern of the distribution of population according to religious persuasion remained the same as under the Aghlabids. Val di Mazara was predominantly Muslim, Val di Noto was considerably less so, and Christianity continued to be the prevailing religion in Val di Mona. But from the beginning, the Kalbite policy was to extend Muslim colonies in Val di Noto and Val di Mone at the expense of the Christians, whose lands were sometimes confiscated and distributed among Muslims. This policy had very little success as it did not lead to any significant trend of conversion to Islam in these areas. The one steady source of increase for the Muslim population was immigration from North Africa, and this depended largely on the political or economic situation there. In 1004 AD and 1005 AD, during a pestilence in Ifriqiya, there was heavy immigration to Sicily. Other waves of immigration followed in 1015 AD and 1016 AD, 1018 AD and 1019 AD, and 1022 AD and 1023 AD. Towards the end of the Kalbite rule, there was a wave of immigration of the Ismailis persecuted by the Zirid Almoiz. At its height, the Muslim population in Sicily may have consisted of 500,000. There was not much communal unity in the Muslim population, apart from the Arab-Berber hostility, which erupted from time to time. There were other divisive policies and factors of internecine tension. Al-Akal played off the old and new immigrants against each other. The Sicilian Muslims are compared sometimes to the Muwallad ethnic group in Spain, and were similarly exploited by the Arab elite. Muqaddisi is alone in stating that the Muslim population in Sicily adhered to the Hanafi legal rite. All other accounts agree that the Maliki rite was generally followed. Presumably the Kalbite rulers, who remained loyal to the nominal suzerainty of the Fatimids, were Ismailis, at least outwardly, and so must have been a certain unknown percentage of the ruling hierarchy. But Ismailism does not seem to have seeped down to the levels of the creative elite and the masses of the population, whereas many Sunni theological works were written in Sicily. There is no evidence of any significant Ismaili scholarship. All this indicates that Kalbite Sicily enjoyed remarkable religious tolerance insofar as Islamic sects were concerned. There were several divisive factors within the Islamic population of the island, as we have seen, but sectarianism was not one of these. In Val di Mazara, the soldiers of the Jund were paid cash by the exchequer. Each Iklim, which means district in Sicily, had a unit of the Jund and its military and religious center. In addition, the Iqta system, which had been imported and introduced by the Aghlabids, led in this period to multiple division of land according to the Muslim law of inheritance. Arab place names for small hamlets and farms, which have survived in Sicily, point to the fragmentation of small holdings. In Christian area, revenue was raised by the classical Islamic taxes, jizya, which means poll tax, and haraj, which means land tax, assuming that by this time these two taxes were clearly distinguished. The agricultural economy of Kalbite Sicily was sustained by an excellent irrigation system. Persian hydraulics techniques were imported and the Roman siphon system was also retained. Remains of Arab reservoirs still survive. Most sources of water in Sicily acquired Arabic names, as did also the measurements of the flow of water. Abundance of fresh water from springs and rivulets made the island rich in horticulture and gardening. Cotton and hemp were cultivated at Teatini and in other areas. Oranges, lemons, and other citrus fruits were grown in abundance and exported. The Arabs brought to Sicily and to Europe the knowledge of cultivating sugarcane and crushing it in mills. They also introduced mulberries, silkworms, papyrus, the sumac tree for tanning and dye, as well as such fruits as dates and nuts like pistachio. Sicilian Arab poets testify to the excellence of wine distilled from indigenous grapes. The Sicilian Muslims were experts in growing root and green vegetables. All this led to a revolutionary change in the agrarian and industrial economy of Sicily. Arabic horticultural loanwords in the Sicilian dialect bear testimony to Arab expertise in agriculture. Dear listeners, support me with Buy Me a Coffee or a Super Thanks. Mining industries included gold, silver, lead, mercury, sulfur, naphtha, vitriol, antimony, and alum. Most of the mineral production was concentrated in the region of Etna. Ammonium salt was mined near Etna and sold abroad. Timber was collected in abundance from the forests, especially in the broad valley above Kefalu. There was a thriving fishing industry, and a new technique of tunny fishing was developed. Silk manufactured in Sicily had markets abroad. There were Tiraz factories manufacturing precious cloth at Corleone and Palermo, but most of the Tiraz output was consumed within Sicily. Foreign trade was mainly in the hands of the Arabs. But there is evidence that there were some traders in cereals, slaves, and cattle, who were of Persian origin. There was active trade between Sicily and Ifriqiya, Egypt, and the Muslim outposts in southern Italy. There was also considerable trade with Italian coastal states, especially Naples, Salerno, and Amalfi. This volume of trade brought great wealth to the island. On the other hand, because of the internal civil strife which erupted from time to time, fortresses and fortified points had to be constructed where the peasants and other citizens could take refuge if there was war in the area. Kalbite Sicily had 320 fortresses spread over the island, guarding 23 cities, numerous towns, and numberless hamlets. Palermo was fortified, and the fortifications of its two important quarters, the Qasr and the Khalisa, were especially strong. In every Iqlim, at least one city was well fortified, and had a cathedral mosque to serve as the bastion of Muslim power. During the reign of Abul Qasim, the globe-trotting geographer Ibn Hawqal visited Sicily in 872 AD and 873 AD. From his account, we get a clear impression of Palermo under the early Kalbites. The city was surrounded by a wall and a trench. The whole city was divided into 5 sections, Harat. Of these, the Qasr was situated in Old Palermo. Its fortifications were flanked by towers, and in it lived the merchants and the nobility of the city. The Khalisa, where the Emir and his retainers had their residences, did not have markets or warehouses, but it had public offices, the arsenal, the prison, and several baths. More populous and larger than these two elite sections of the city was the unfortified Harat as-Sakaliba, or the Slav quarter, which was on the coast and was the meeting place for sailors and foreign merchants. The remaining 2 sections of the town were the Al-Hara al-Jadida, which means the new quarter, and the quarter of the cathedral mosque. These 2 sections had their markets and crafts and were inhabited by soldiers, oil merchants, grain merchants, crossers, tailors, armorers, and coppersmiths. In addition to the 5 major sections of the city, Ibn Hawqal also mentions other smaller quarters, such as a Jewish quarter and the Muaskar. presumably a small military colony. The population of the whole city at that time was about 300,000. From the city to the banks of Oreto, the whole area was full of gardens and pleasaunces. There were more mosques in Palermo than in any other Muslim city Ibn Hawqal visited. People prided themselves on having mosques exclusively for the use of their families and their clients, which means mawali. According to another Arab geographer, al-Muqaddisi, the two Eids, which means festivals, were celebrated with more splendor in Sicily than elsewhere in the Islamic world. The population of Palermo was very mixed. Apart from the Arabs, there were Berbers, Greeks, Lombards, Jews, Slavs, Persians, Turks, and Negroes. There were contrasts of riches and poverty, of violent soldiering and peaceful pursuit of crafts. The Muslims had adopted a large number of non-Muslim practices. As in every other metropolis, there was in Palermo pride, rancor, misery, and other social maladies. These seem to have annoyed Ibn Hawqal to the point of irritation. He complains that Palermo had no talented men, no scholars, no wise or pious persons, accusations which are proved untrue by other evidence. He found the people of the city dull and lazy, and inclined more towards vice than virtue. He is annoyed with their diet, which included an excessive use of raw onions. This tarnished the image of Palermo among some later Muslim geographers, and is reflected in Yaqut, who regards the diet of Sicilian Muslims as unwholesome and odorous, their habits as neither clean nor pious, and their houses as dark and dirty. On the other hand, there are accounts praising the Muslims of Sicily for their cleanliness, their style of dress, their moderation, and their cultivation of moral qualities. Messina was probably the most spacious of all Sicilian ports, and an international depot of commerce where traders from Europe and North Africa converged. End of Chapter 4.